Lesson 13. Cooperation. Cooperation is the beginning of all organized effort. As was stated in the second lesson of this course, Andrew Carnegie accumulated a gigantic fortune through the cooperative efforts of a small group of men numbering not more than a score. You, too, can learn how to use this principle. There are two forms of cooperation to which your attention will be directed in this lesson. Namely, first, the cooperation between people who group themselves together or form alliances for the purpose of attaining a given end, under the principles known as the law of the mastermind. Second, the cooperation between the conscious and the subconscious minds, which forms a reasonable hypothesis of man's ability to contact, communicate with, and draw upon infinite intelligence. To one who has not given serious thought to this subject, the foregoing hypothesis may seem unreasonable. But follow the evidence of its soundness and study the facts upon which the hypothesis is based, and then draw your own conclusions. Let us begin with a brief review of the physical construction of the body. We know that the whole body is traversed by a network of nerves which serve as the channels of communication between the indwelling spirit ego, which we call mind, and the functions of the external organism. This nervous system is dual. One system, known as the sympathetic, is the channel for all those activities which are not consciously directed by our volition, such as the operation of the digestive organs, the repair of the daily wear and tear of the tissues, and the like. The other system, known as the voluntary or cerebrospinal system, is the channel through which we receive conscious perception from the physical senses and exercise control over the movements of the body. This system has its center in the brain, while the other has its center in the ganglion mass at the back of the stomach, known as the solar plexus, and sometimes spoken of as the abdominal brain. The cerebrospinal system is the channel of our volitional or conscious mental action, and the sympathetic system is the channel of that mental action which unconsciously supports the vital functions of the body. Thus, the cerebrospinal system is the organ of the conscious mind, and the sympathetic is that of the subconscious mind. But the interaction of conscious and subconscious minds requires a similar interaction between the corresponding systems of nerves, and one conspicuous connection by which this is provided is the vagus nerve. This nerve passes out of the cerebral region as a portion of the voluntary system, and through it we control the vocal organs. Then it passes onward to the thorax, sending out branches to the heart and lungs, and finally, passing through the diaphragm, it loses the outer coating which distinguishes the nerves of the voluntary system and becomes identified with those of the sympathetic system, so forming a connecting link between the two and making the man physically a single entity. Similarly, different areas of the brain indicate their connection with the objective and subjective activities of the mind respectively. And speaking in a general way, we may assign the frontal portion of the brain to the former and the posterior portion to the latter, while the intermediate portion partakes of the character of both. The intuitional faculty has its correspondence in the upper area of the brain, situated between the frontal and the posterior portions, and psychologically speaking, it is here that intuitive ideas find entrance. These, at first, are more or less unformed and generalized in character, but are nevertheless perceived by the conscious mind. Otherwise, we should not be aware of them at all. Then the effort of nature is to bring these ideas into more definite and usable shape. So the conscious mind lays hold on them and induces a corresponding vibratory current in the voluntary system of nerves, and this in turn induces a similar current in the involuntary system, thus handing the idea over to the subjective mind. The vibratory current, which had first descended from the apex of the brain to the frontal brain, and thus through the voluntary system to the solar plexus, is now reversed and ascends from the solar plexus through the sympathetic system to the posterior brain, this return current indicating the action of the subjective mind. If we were to remove the surface portion of the apex of the brain, we should find immediately below it the shining belt of brain substance called the corpus callus. This is the point of union between the subjective and objective, and as the current returns from the solar plexus to this point, it is restored to the objective portion of the brain in a fresh form which it has acquired by the silent alchemy of the subjective mind. Thus, the conception, which was at first only vaguely recognized, is restored to the objective mind in a definite and workable form, and then the objective mind, acting through the frontal brain, the area of comparison and analysis.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?